Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Life, Liberty, and Levin Sunday. Thank you for being here. Two great guests, America's governor, Governor Ron DeSantis, and Representative Byron Donalds. But before we get to them, Biden, Harris, Blinken, Sullivan, the Four Stooges. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should be embarrassed. They should be apologizing to Benjamin Netanyahu, the state of Israel, and the American people. Why? Because something fantastic happened last week, despite the fact that the Biden-Harris regime did everything they could to prevent it, despite the fact the whole Western world did everything they could to prevent it. What am I talking about? This entire episode has demonstrated that the Western world, whether it's Europe, whether it's the United States, under this current regime, has lost its moral clarity, has lost its moral courage, has turned on its own founding principles and belief system. This is really quite simple. There's nothing complicated about it. You had terrorists who invaded Israel unprovoked, specifically targeting babies, children, teenagers, women, men, with the most monstrous, genocidal tactics to kill them, to humiliate them, rape them, decapitate them, burn them alive. And what did the Western world do? Well, for about 15 minutes, they wrung their hands and they said, this is horrendous. And they condemned Hamas because talk is cheap. Talk is cheap. But when the going got tough, they actually turned on the victims. They turned on the Jews in Israel. They turned on the Israelis. They turned on the Israeli government. They turned on Netanyahu. They sought to dehumanize him. These four stooges, they sought to topple him. They undermined him. They had meetings with opposition parties. They had meetings with cabinet secretaries. They went around Netanyahu. They smeared Netanyahu in Axios, in Politico, in the Washington Post, in the New York Times. Why? Because they wanted to use October 7th to create a Palestinian state. They wanted to use October 7th to do something they've always wanted to do. Re-engineer the entire Middle East, to build up Iran, to build down Israel. And so they took this opportunity, this genocidal opportunity, to try and exploit the situation when the Churchill of the Middle East, Benjamin Netanyahu, was trying to defend his people. That's what I'm talking about. And now Sinwar is dead. No thanks to Biden. No thanks to Harris or Blinken or Sullivan or all the rest of these reprobates. In spite of them. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu said the leaders of Hamas are in Rafah. The enemy is headquartered in Rafah. We have to go into Rafah. And here was the reaction of Kamala Harris, who wants to be president of the United States, who wants to be commander-in-chief. She doesn't have any moral standards. She doesn't have any moral center. After the slaughtering of babies and women and raping them and murdering them, 251 hostages taken, 100 hostages still in a tunnel of rats. And this is what she had to say. Cut one, go.
We have been clear in multiple conversations and in every way that any major military operation in Rafah would be a huge mistake. Let me tell you something. I have studied the maps. There's nowhere for those folks to go. And we're looking at about 1.5 million people in Rafah who are there because they were told to go there, most of them. And so we've been very clear that it would be a mistake to move into Rafah with any type of military operation.
A mistake, but would there be consequences if he does move forward?
Well, we're going to take it one step at a time, but we've been very clear in terms of our perspective on whether or not that should happen.
Are you ruling out that there would be consequences from the United States?
I am ruling out nothing.
Boy, she gave her strong support to Netanyahu and the Israeli people and the Israeli government. Netanyahu made it clear, we're going to get Sinwar, we're going to get the leadership, and we have to go into Rafah. That's the only way I can protect my people, he said. What about Joe Biden? Cut two, go.
I made it clear that if they go into Rafah, they haven't gone into Rafah yet. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah. to deal with the cities. We're not going to supply the weapons and the artillery shells used that have been used.
Artillery shells as well.
Yeah.
No,
they haven't gone into the population centers. What they did is right on the border, and it's causing problems with right now in terms of with Egypt, which I've worked very hard to make sure we have a relationship. I've made it clear to Bibi and the War Cabinet, they're not going to get our support if, in fact, they go in these population centers. We've held up the weapons. We've held up the one shipment.
What a disgusting disgrace. Blackmail, threats, withholding weapons. That would be like FDR withholding weapons from Churchill while they're in the middle of the fight with the Nazis. Who's ever seen anything like this? And it wasn't just that. He was working with France and Britain and other European Union countries to try and get them the same thing. He literally wanted to cut off arms to Israel, which they've done today. A long list of arms, a long list of armaments, a long list of things that Israel needs to defend itself and to fight Iran. And I'll get to that in a minute. Our foreign policy is obvious when it comes to Israel. Israel cannot win. Israel must lose. That is the Biden-Harris foreign policy. And look how snarky they are. Look at them. Look how condescending they are. And then, of course, there's Blinken, who's a disgrace and a disaster. The State Department. What did he have to say? Cut 3. Go.
Handshakes and smiles aside, in the quest for a ceasefire with Hamas, Secretary of State Antony Blinken shot down Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan for a final Gaza invasion.
We will not support a major military operation in Rafah absent an effective plan to make sure that civilians are not harmed.
But a Netanyahu advisor confirms to CBS News the Prime Minister is not backing down from his plan to attack Rafah.
And notice every citizen who dies, every civilian in the Gaza Strip is Netanyahu's fault. It's the Israelis' fault. You had a leader, one of the second-tier leaders of Hamas about 3 weeks ago say out loud, you can go to memri.org, MEMRI.org, if they still have it up there. And he said, 80% of the people who've died as a result of this war, Israel and Hamas, were either Hamas terrorists or members of their family. Have you heard that on CBS? Have you heard that on CNN or elsewhere? Then you have guys like Dick Durbin. And he was representative of Chris Murphy and Coons and all the rest of these guys who go on these Sunday shows like they actually know something when they sit on their butts in Washington, D.C., while people, the Israelis, are fighting for their lives. They mimic what Harris and Biden have to say. Cut 4. Go.
I think the president's doing the right thing. We want to support Israel. We want to make sure that the actions that they take to defend themselves and to stop Hamas terrorism do not involve innocent people giving their lives and being injured.
You know, Washington, D.C. is such a cesspool. Our ruling class is completely unethical, lacks any morals, any principle. All this hot air, we support Israel to one side of their mouth while they're blackmailing Israel and undermining the Netanyahu government, while they're leaking against it to their favorite Pravda-type newspapers, or in this case, I guess they're more like Al Jazeera, to be perfectly honest with you. And so what happens here, ladies and gentlemen? Trainees and reservists, not special intel from the United States, not special forces, as they're fighting in Rafah, what do? They have a drone that comes across Mr. Sinwar, who's sitting by himself, like the pathetic subhuman that he is, and they kill him. And so Sinwar is dead. Now what does Biden have to say? Cut 5, go.
Good day for the world. I'm called Netanyahu to congratulate him getting Sinwar. He has a lot of blood in his hands. American blood, Israeli blood, and others. And I told him that we were pleased with his action. And further that now's the time to move on. Move toward a ceasefire in Gaza. Make sure that we move in the direction that we're going to be in a position to make things better for the whole world. It's time for this war to end and bring these hostages home. So that's what we're ready to do. And I'm sending Tony Blinken to Israel. I guess he's going in 5 days, 4 days. 4 or 5 days in, he's going. I talked with Bibi about that. We're going to work out what is the day after now. How do we secure Gaza and move on? Thank you very much.
Do you feel more confident, sir, about a ceasefire?
Ceasefire. Ceasefire, that's the special word. Ceasefire, under every circumstance, under every condition. Ceasefire, ceasefire. If Netanyahu had agreed to a ceasefire, well, guess who'd still be alive? Sinwar. Hamas would still be very vigorous. Hezbollah would still be shooting missiles. Same with the Houthis. Iran would be having the time of their lives. Ceasefire. And here, of course, is Kamala Harris, who wants a promotion. She thinks she should be the commander-in-chief. What did she have to say? Go.
Today, Israel confirmed that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, is dead, and justice has been served. And the United States, Israel, and the entire world are better off as a result. Sinwar was responsible for the killing of thousands of innocent people, including the victims of October 7 and hostages killed in Gaza. He had American blood on his hands. Today, I can only hope that the families of the victims of Hamas feel a sense and measure of relief. Sinwar was the mastermind of October 7, the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. A terrorist attack that killed 1,200 innocent people and included horrific sexual violence and more than 250 hostages taken into Gaza, including 7 Americans, living and deceased, who remain in captivity.
This is the woman who refused to undertake one of her few responsibilities as vice president, to sit over a meeting of a joint session of Congress when Bibi Netanyahu came to the United States to talk about, among other things, the war that Israel was waging against its enemies. She refused to meet with him. She has denounced him. She's defended Tlaib, supported her re-election. She's defended Omar, supported her re-election. Yes, she's close to CARE, a Hamas front group. She's close to the mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, who's a Jew hater. Yes, but when it comes to Netanyahu, the elected leader, we call that democracy, Kamala Harris. Democracy. She refused to meet with him, and she, like all the others, trash him. Here's the New York Times, May 18th. Invading Rafah doesn't help Israel. Here's another one. New York Times Friedman. Thomas Friedman's been wrong about everything, and he's a disaster. Biden could restrict arms sales if IDF enters Rafah over U.S. objections. See that one? Our media is in full-throated attack on Israel in defense of the indefensible. New York Times. Shira Efron of the Israel Policy Forum. Israel's Rafah incursion helps no one except Netanyahu. CBS, May 7, 2024. Israel tank unit takes control of Gaza's side of Rafah border. Crossing as Netanyahu rejects ceasefire proposal. Jewish News Service. Report U.S. withholding sensitive intelligence on Hamas from Israel, the blackmail. European Union, always strong, right? Urges Israel to end Rafah offensive immediately. And then, of course, the New York Times, May 26, 2024. The International Court of Justice is radical, terrorist-loving, fascist-loving, communist-loving, phony court. An arm of the United Nations ordered Israel to suspend its military campaign in Rafah in southern Gaza, and they put out criminal complaints against the Prime Minister of Israel. So they sought to topple Netanyahu. They blackmailed Netanyahu and his government. They've tried to dehumanize Netanyahu. That joint session of Congress, we saw what they did. They're attacking Netanyahu and Israel for the ground operation right now in Lebanon. And of course, the order's gone out from Mr. Joe Biden. You Israelis, you better not attack Iran's nuclear sites, because we want them to have nukes. That's what Obama was all about. You better not attack their oil sites, because we have an election, and I have to install the least democratic candidate in American history, Kamala Harris. Blackmail, threaten, micromanage, and there's only one guy that stood up to them, Netanyahu. And here's what he had to say on Sinwar's killing. Go.
1 year ago, Yahya Sinwar, the terrorist chief of Hamas, launched the October 7th massacre against Israel. It was the bloodiest attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. It was the worst attack on the Jewish state since the founding of Israel. Sinwar's terrorists murdered in cold blood 1,200 people. That's elderly people, Holocaust survivors, children. They brutally raped women. They beheaded men. They burnt babies alive. And they took some 250 men, 251 women, men, and children hostage to the dungeons of Gaza. Today, the mastermind of this day of sheer evil is no more. Sinwar is dead. He was killed in Rafah by the brave soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces. While this is not the end of the war in Gaza, it's the beginning of the end. To the people of Gaza, I have a simple message. This war can end tomorrow. It can end if Hamas lays down its arms and returns our hostages. Hamas is holding 101 hostages in Gaza, who are citizens of 23 countries, citizens of Israel, but citizens of many other countries. Israel is committed to doing everything in our power to bring all of them home. And Israel will guarantee the safety of all those who return our hostages. But to those who would harm our hostages, I have another message. Israel will hunt you down and bring you to justice. I also have a message of hope to the peoples of the region. The axis of terror that was built by Iran is collapsing before our eyes. Nasrallah is gone. His deputy Muhsin is gone. Haniyeh is gone. Def is gone. Sinwar is gone. The reign of terror that the Iranian regime has imposed on its own people and on the peoples of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, this too will come to an end. All those who seek a future of prosperity and peace in the Middle East should unite to build a better future. Together, we can push back the forces of darkness and create a future of light and hope for all of us.
That's a leader. There's only one person running for president of the United States who has the fortitude, the courage, who is morally fit to be president of the United States, and that is Donald Trump. Biden and Harris unleashed these terrorists. They unleashed Iran and its surrogates in the Middle East. They caused this. They started this. And I finally figured out their foreign policy with respect to Israel. Israel must lose. One last thing. Ariel Kahana, a reporter at Israel Hayom in Israel. The claim has been spread in the last day in the context of the Sinwar assassination as if the IDF and the generals wanted to enter Rafah. It's not only a rewriting of history, but a real distortion of it. Netanyahu actually had to go against most of his generals and members of his own cabinet and his own, effectively, defense minister or secretary. He had to stand up against them, too. The IDF's first plan did not include activity in Rafah, and what he means by that is the leadership. Only later, when it became clear that the remaining Hamas battalions had fled to the southern city, it was Netanyahu who asked the army for a plan to deal with them. A month before the IDF's entry into Rafah at the beginning of May, Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi publicly expressed support for a deal with Sinwar. This is what the United States was pushing, which meant stopping the war. Gallant, in effect, their defense secretary, Gantz, the general who wants to be prime minister but is utterly incapable of it, and other generals backed him up. Astonishingly, Netanyahu, the minister of the right, the bereaved parents from the heroic forum, and a few other sane people left in this country insisted in the face of the security guards to also go down to south to Rafah. The external, mainly from Americans, but also from Egypt and Western countries, and internal journalists. The pressures not to act in Rafah were so heavy that Netanyahu's political advisor, Ophir Fleck, unusually published an article in the Wall Street Journal on March 14th, whose title was, "In Rafah, Israel will defeat Hamas." Why? To explain why the action there is so necessary. So everybody's congratulating themselves. Sinwar is dead. But my God, what a bunch of cowards, immoral buffoons, siding effectively with the enemy of mankind, giving them aid and comfort, giving them cover, giving them tons of ink by attacking the victims, the state of Israel, Netanyahu and his government. My God, how disgusting. Sinwar is dead. But no thanks to Biden, Harris, Blinken, or Sullivan, the four stooges of American diplomacy. I'll be right back.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.